Good evening.
Good evening, Bill. Sounding loud and clear.
I'd like to open the Bellingham Planning Board meeting for Thursday, February 11th, 2021. Jim, if you could just give us an overview of why we're doing this on Zoom and how we're permitted to do this on Zoom.
Sure. Pursuant to the Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 orders suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting will be via the Zoom online option. See information instructions at the end of our agenda.
And we have a couple items on our agenda this evening. Before we go any further, I notice we have Stephen O'Connell out there. I just want to clarify, like we do every time he comes in front of us, there's no relation between myself and Stephen. Just like the public to know that. Jim, we want to talk about the continued public hearing for 0 South Maple Street. Can you bring us up to speed on what's going on with that?
Absolutely. So if you may recall at the last meeting, the applicant had a few items that the board requested amendments to the plan, as well as exploring a few different other items on the parcel itself. You have in your packet tonight a revised plan set, some updated responses to the peer review, as well as a letter from the Maplebrook condominiums dated February 4th, 2021.
Can we have the applicant? Is the applicant present?
Yes, good evening. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Steve O'Connell from Turning Point Engineering.
Can you tell us what has happened since our last meeting?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. As Jim indicated, we prepared revised plans and written responses and a revised stormwater report to BSC's January 5th review comment letter. Since that time, we've been provided with correspondence from Jim that BSC's comments have been satisfied from an engineering level. The revised plans that we can review if the board liked, that you do have a copy of in your packets. Address some of this stormwater comments. We did take into consideration some of the things we heard and discussed together at the last meeting, and we heard from the abutters. So for example, we made some improvements to the dumpster location. We provided some clarification on snow storage areas. We provided revisions to the landscaping plan, which increased the quantity of plantings in some of the sensitive areas. We believe all of which of these you'll find satisfactory, and we hope you do. So as far as I'm concerned, in my correspondence with Jim, to the extent that he could share, we feel as though all of these technical items have been addressed. All the comments that we've been provided, we believe, have been addressed. We did provide written responses to 2 separate letters of objections that were provided to us by the Maplebrook condominium. Happy to talk about those to the extent the board would like. And I guess barring any specific aspects of this proposal, I guess I'll defer back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Jim, it's my understanding they were not able to flip the building.
Yeah, Stephen, do you have the plan handy? Could you share the screen, kind of walk the board through that?
Sure. Okay, everybody see that? I'm just going to go to the layout plan. So it was requested that we consider flipping the building so that this loading area would be on this side of the building. We discussed it with our client, who was opposed to it, but, beyond that, we did look at the possibility of doing so. And what became a challenge was the turning movements of the truck. So imagine the loading dock on this side of the building, a truck turning in this driveway, pulling up into this other property at 47 South Maple, backing in at a funny angle up to the loading dock. And then that maneuver was manageable, but then exiting this parked position from this loading platform area became very difficult because they had to pull up, make this swing this way, which became out into these parking spaces, swing back this way, exit out this way, which they're doing now, but from a different position, and then pulling all the way around and exiting. It became very difficult, very challenging maneuver to make, which had detrimental impacts on other aspects of the site layout. It was not something we certainly could convince our client to entertain, even though they were opposed from the start. We tried to convince them, let us show you, and then it didn't work. So it was easy to show them that it didn't work. We believe that if the loading area was on this end of the building, the visibility of it from South Maple Street and potentially the abutters across the street had way more of an impact on the neighborhood than having it on this side and being heavily screened with landscaping and the existing vegetation that exists between the property line and the abutting property line. We felt as though that this was still the best layout. So I hope that satisfies your understanding of our efforts.
Okay, and we'll get back to that as we continue the discussion. Jim, I'd like to talk about can you address a letter from the Condominium Association?
Sure. So I believe the applicant has actually provided a response to that letter. I don't know if you want Stephen to go run through those responses.
Could you do the highlights, please? Stephen?
Yes, I'm happy to do so. Let's start with the letter dated, I guess to be their first letter, which I believe is, just pull that up. I'm sorry. Okay, so their first letter was dated January 13th. So we prepared a response letter dated January 29th. I will just start right at the top. I think this was particular comment number one was a constant theme in the letter of objection. The property title is held in the name of CX3 LLC, concealing the identity of the shareholders. Many surrounding towns hold to the doctrine of merger when it relates to abutting parcels of land under the same ownership. With that being said, we hope town council have investigated the matter thoroughly as it would relate to the ability to develop the property as a whole when merged with the property that surrounds the subject property. Our response is the subject property is not held in common ownership with any abutting properties, specifically 47 South Maple Street, and therefore is not subject to the merger provisions in Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 6. Furthermore, pursuant to Section 240-34A, Paragraph 1, A through C of the Bellingham zoning bylaws, the subject property is a buildable lot. There are specific provisions in the zoning bylaws that provide for the grandfathering of this lot. So it is absolutely a buildable lot, despite the comment from the abutter. Another consistent comment in their letter was the existing right-of-way across the abutting property in which my client has secured an easement. I just think that they're looking for ways to object to try to stop this project. And again, our response, yes, there is existing right-of-way across the property at 47 South Maple. New easements have been granted by the owner of 47 South Maple to my client that will allow trucks to enter and exit the properties via the existing driveway. The approach to our development of the site was that we wanted to avoid additional points of access onto South Maple Street that could potentially be disruptive to the adjacent residential properties. So a lot of thought went into that. A lot of thought went into reducing impervious and having, not creating new points of access out to South Maple, and, being criticized for it now. So the majority of the deliveries that'll be made to this site will be parcel delivery trucks, UPS, FedEx, the same style of trucks that make deliveries on a daily basis to the surrounding residential properties, including the Maplebrook condominiums. Deliveries by trailer truck to this site will be occasional, approximately one per week, maybe even less. During these deliveries, the trucks may back up to the loading platform, or it may stop in the parking area where a forklift will come out of the building, one of the overhead doors, and remove the items off the truck. There's no side door on tractor trailers. I never said there was. So that was a comment of theirs we provided a response to. Again, we made every effort to reduce impervious surfaces, decrease stormwater runoff. I know that the planning board is always favorable on doing that when it makes sense, and we feel as though this is absolutely makes sense. I'm gonna try to get to a couple of other maybe items that seem to.
I also, can you address the February 4th letter?
Sure. So February 4th letter. Had some repetitive comments within it. So again, comment number 1 in the February 4th letter states that the subject lot is 25,000 square feet, according to the zoning Bellingham, the town of Bellingham zoning bylaws. The minimum required lot area in the industrial zone is 60,000 square feet. The subject lot does not meet the requirement. Again, this lot is a buildable lot pursuant to the zoning bylaws, section 240-34A, paragraphs 1A through C. It's very clear that this lot meets the criteria in which it is a buildable lot.
That's the same argument you used in the previous letter.
It is, yeah. It's the same. Yep, it's the same, similar comment and the identical response. So it is absolutely a building lot. The comment number 2 in the February 4th letter states the subject lot. I'm sorry, the subject lot frontage on South Maple Street is 150. According to the Bellingham zoning bylaws, the minimum required street frontage is 200. The subject lot does not meet the requirement. It's the identical response that I provided. The frontage, the lot's a buildable lot pursuant to that section of the bylaws that I referenced. Same exact response as comment number 1. Comment number 3 in the February 4th letter states, according to the town of Bellingham zoning bylaws, section 240-40, intensity of use schedule, the minimum front yard setback and the minimum side yard setback per the provisions of the footnotes C say that the setback should increase to 100 feet for industrial buildings facing or adjoining a residential, suburban, or agricultural district. Both provisions apply to the subject property, both to the south and east. So that is not a accurate statement. The subject property does not abut or adjoin residential, suburban, or agricultural zoning districts. It is surrounded by the industrial district. So this provision does not apply to the subject property. The next footnote F, for industrial or commercial uses, setback to increase to 30 feet for minimum side yard setback where adjoining agricultural, suburban, residential, or multifamily district or residential use. Both provisions apply to the subject property, both to the south and east. Again, same identical response. The subject property does not adjoin agricultural, suburban, residential, or multifamily zoning districts, and therefore, again, it does not apply to the subject property. Comment number 4 in the letter states, notwithstanding the above provisions, the elevated loading dock to the south of the building violates the zoning sideline setback. The loading dock also violates the 100-foot buffer zone imposed upon the premier property in the year 1990. Any alteration to the 100-foot buffer zone is also prohibited. Furthermore, the 100-foot buffer zone cannot be used for day-to-day operations. First and foremost, the 100-foot buffer zone does not apply to this subject property. This subject property is not subject to conditions of approval of the premier equipment property located at 47 South Maple Street. Although there are provisions in the zoning bylaw, as we just discussed a moment ago, they're not applicable to this property because this property does not adjoin those specific zoning districts. So although I understand their comment, it is not applicable to this property where this building is proposed. Number 5 states that the premier property, through its granting of proposed easement to the subject property, is directly involved in and party to this proposal. The premier property is already deficit in the required parking space to the building size requirements. Any shared use of under capacity and parking spaces is not within the zoning requirements. Again, just because the abutting property granted my client an easement, it does not make them a party to this proposal. Anything to do with the premier property and their parking requirements, whether they're compliant or not, are a separate issue and not related to this application. I did speak with my client's attorney and they absolutely agree with that determination. Moving on to comment number 6, pursuant to Bellingham Zoning Board of Appeals, notice of appeal of planning board decision case number 2017-6 dated June 7th, 2017, with regard to property commonly known and numbered as 47 South Maple Street, Bellingham, Mass. 02019. The zoning board in April/May 2017 directed the building inspector to issue an enforcement order to remove any activity within the 100-foot buffer in compliance with the 1990 modified building plan. Violation to the order have returned to the 2017 degree. Again, whatever is enforceable on the 47 South Maple Street property, known as also referenced as the premier property, is a separate issue not related to the proposal on this property in front of the planning board. They're not related, not held in common ownership. Provisions for the site development on that property, conditions of approval, applicable sections of the zoning bylaw are absolutely separate from the property where this building is proposed. So
Thank you very
that
much.
concludes the comments in the February 4th letter, Mr. Chairman.
And I may mispronounce your name, sir, Mr. Ignati. We're going to hold off for your comments until the board has an opportunity to ask questions of Mr. Kupfer. Jim, in regards to the response from the applicant, you concur?
Yeah, generally so. I will say that the applicant did come before the building inspector and myself maybe about a year ago now with this with not the proposal but the lot, and saying that they were seeking a development, and we did instruct the applicant to provide the town with enough evidence that it is a buildable lot, meaning, when it was subdivided, what were the dimensions at that time, the ownership at that time, that was then vetted by town council. And so, yes, the applicant is correct in stating that it is an isolated lot, meaning that section he referenced, 240-34, and it reverts back to Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 6, allowing for reduction in the zoning requirements. For an industrial, it's 20,000 square feet minimum, 125 frontage, 10 sides, 20 front, and 20 rear. So that does meet the standards.
What I'd like to now is open up to the board. Liz, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions at this time.
Dennis? Dennis, will have to unmute him. Can we unmute Dennis? Boy, I've always wanted to say that.
I have none.
Okay. Phil?
No, thank you, Jim, for explaining that and going through it. Sounds like town council's already weighed in on this, so.
Brian?
No, my only question would be just to confirm. So I think it's the south side of the building. That is entirely within the lot of 0 Maple Street. Is that
Yes, yeah, that's accurate.
okay? No, I have no other questions.
Steve, I have a couple of questions for you. Number one, I realize you're within the 100-foot setback. Is there anything we can do to minimize any impacts on your neighbors that you haven't done already?
I mean, nothing comes to mind, Mr. Chairman. We've provided a revised landscaping plan, which beefs up the proposed plantings along that south side. We provided a continuous row of evergreen plantings, including screening for the dumpster. It's an attractive building in our opinion. It's a really low impact use that'll occupy the building. At the end of the day, after the last meeting, when I started to prepare responses and look into it, and I think about the type of activity that goes on in our butters properties with the amount of residents that live there and the constant traffic flow that comes in and out of there and where their dumpsters are placed and located. This building and this operation at this property will have no more of a nuisance on their property than what currently exists within their own property, in my professional opinion.
Okay.
And I feel like we've gone to great lengths to address their concerns. Not that we don't want to be a good neighbor. My clients want to be a good neighbor, but again, we're a by right use in a zone that allows what's proposed to be which is proposed to occur. We've provided responses and made some revisions, and we hope the board finds them satisfactory.
Okay.
Bill, to that effect, if I may. So Stephen, I see that you put the landscaping plan, which I appreciate the row of landscaping, and then the concrete retaining wall, which certainly will improve, screening. But I want two things. I didn't notice a detail of that. So dimensions of height and depth, or the material you're going to use, and then and I also noticed it was just along the south side. Is there any ability to bring that back behind the loading dock back to the wall at all? Oh, you're muted.
The function of that retaining wall is actually to allow the paved surface to ramp down. So that wall actually won't be visible unless you're standing down in the ramp. So it doesn't provide any screening. It's to hold back the earth so that a truck that would pull up to that loading area would allow it to its truck when the truck door opens, that the stuff that comes out can come out at grade.
Oh, okay, I misunderstood that. I don't know what the board's thought on that was. I thought it would have been a nice improvement to minimize any noise that would direct towards specifically 60 South Maple there.
So if you raise that, it does not serve the purpose? Steve?
Right. Yeah, it's not intended as a barrier wall or a screening wall. It's it's a retaining wall just to hold back the earth so that area where a truck could access that loading platform would back downhill, slightly downhill a few feet, so that the back of the truck would be at that elevation around that exists around the building.
Okay.
It was not intended to provide a screen. Honestly, I think it would be more of an eyesore to have a large wall, providing a screen around the fairly attractive building. We don't expect, it's not a manufacturing facility. There's no processing that occurs. It's not a noise generating operation that will occur in this building. No outside storage of materials. Again, I can't stress enough that the types of activity that would occur on this property are comparable to the types of activity that occur every day within abutting properties. Amazon deliveries, FedEx deliveries, UPS deliveries. There's no doubt in my mind that those types of services visit the Maplebrook condominium multiple times a day for deliveries.
Bill, can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So, Jim, with regard to what we're permitting, we're permitting a use, right? And not necessarily this particular business?
Right, yeah, as standard, it would be great to be able to commit long-term to a tenant, but markets change, all that good stuff. So, yeah, you all's role is to permit the building, the parcel through the use. So you're doing warehouse, office warehouse at this site.
So whereas this particular tenant doesn't have multiple truck deliveries and outdoor activities and other things like that, we're permitting that use. Is that fair to say?
That's correct, and I'm sure we'll get to it shortly here. But same thing with like hours of operation. So I know Stephen had mentioned, I believe it's just your general 9 to 5 operation. I think the board may want to consider some hours of maybe 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. or something like that, so that if this tenant did leave and another one came in and they wanted to do 24/7, they would have to come back to you guys.
Yeah, I like that idea.
I'd like to pick up on that for a moment. Stephen, you are looking for a 9 to 5, how many days a week?
We are looking for 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. on Saturdays. The business will not operate on Sundays.
Is it possible that we can look at, I want to try to merge the two here that Brian just brought up. Can we limit your hours of delivery for the benefit of the abutters to a certain time frame? So it's not disrupting dinner time or school bus time?
I don't know if that's possible, and not to try to be difficult, but I don't know, like if my client can control, FedEx's schedule.
I'm not concerned with FedEx. I'm concerned with more, do you have any large items that are delivered?
Yeah, there'll be like, motors, not car motors, but like motors that run, pumps and, so yeah, things that would have to get offloaded with a forklift, from a trailer truck, maybe once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks.
If we could just encourage those to be done during normal business hours,
Absolutely.
that would be great.
Yeah.
And obviously, things may happen, and just let us know you can deviate.
Yeah.
Hours.
there are some businesses, for clients I've worked at over the years where, they're like Dunkin' Donuts, for example, they get their supplies at like 5 a.m, like on a daily basis or multiple times a week. That's not the case here. These deliveries would come during normal business hours, probably 8 or 9 a.m. and up till 3 or 4, in the afternoon. But that would be what it would be expected.
And based on this being approved and being operational, could you just encourage your, the owner to be aware of any local bus stops for children? To take that in consideration.
Absolutely.
I also understand, Jim, does a hydrant have to be relocated?
Yeah, Stephen, if you could you bring up the plan one more time? I was talking with the deputy and Deputy Milo, who's on the line, and I didn't see the hydrant in the location we talked, and maybe that was just a miscommunication between us. We're looking for the hydrant at the entrance point, along the where you have the water line, basically.
Okay. Let me, so I think what I interpreted, Jim, was that we just wanted to make sure that there was a hydrant in a approximate location.
Okay, yeah, so the one on Premier is past the building, and the one on South Maple, I believe, is across the street. So that's not gonna help either, this building. So they're gonna need one, I believe, right at the, it made sense where you're running that water line.
So the one across the street from this building on South Maple is not adequate?
I don't believe they want to run it across South Maple, but I can let Deputy Milo speak to that.
Okay. Yeah, we're happy to provide a hydrant on the main. I just misunderstood, and I apologize for that.
That'd be the west side of South Maple, correct?
Right, the side with the building on it, yep.
I'd like to open up to the public comments. Robert, we've addressed concerns of your letter, and the floor is yours, sir.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, members of the board. To the applicant, I appreciate all his input on addressing the concerns within our letter. The only thing that I would reserve comment on is I'm not familiar with the particular grandfather clause that he's referring to. So in regards to that, I would have to look that up further. Just a couple of items. I would like the board to just take a closer look at the sideline footnotes on whether or not this pertains, because it does say, now whether this is outside of this grandfathered clause, it does say that if on footnote F, for industrial uses or a residential use, and I'm referring to the residential uses across the street, so that's how I'm making this particular provision F applicable, where it refers to an increase in the sideline requirement. Now, I'm just asking you folks to take a look at that closer in regards to this grandfathered clause and whether or not that is applicable or not. Secondly, I'd like to just make sure that the board's aware that, our entrance is downhill of this particular property, and we have enough drainage issues at the entrance to Maple Brook as it is. And I'm very, very skeptical about whether or not this is going to add further flooding. We already have a dangerous situation there. I don't want to see it become even more dangerous. And then finally, you can't really see the plan that I'm looking at. I'm looking at a building plan here where it still where it shows the loading dock on the south side of the property, and it also has a .. dash line for the sideline, which I'm assuming the applicant sketched in the correct sideline. But according to this drawing, this loading dock still exceeds past that sideline. It extends out past that. And I think the board should take a closer look at that also. And
Okay,
that is the total of my comments.
all right. I think, the applicant has made, thanks to address your concerns. Jim, in regards to stormwater, it's been peer reviewed by engineer?
Yeah, so the peer review engineer has taken a look at it. So that peer review engineer, obviously, works for the board, takes a look at the calculations. It's going to retain more runoff now than what the existing conditions is essentially. So it's, and that will likely be helped by the fact that it's maintaining that existing entrance there. So everything's gonna be captured on site and put into a system underneath that's going to be privately maintained.
And the other two comments that Robert had, can you address those?
Yes, so footnote F does refer to, I believe, 30 feet when abutting others, and we don't include across the street. It's actually there's case law that states that we can't include across the street, but nevertheless, it still is a setback of 32 feet. And then the setback of the loading dock, actually, I don't have a dimension there. So, Stephen, I might refer to you. What is that setback between the property line there and that loading dock? That's a good question.
You're muted, Stephen.
I got multiple screens going here, so I
It's okay.
apologize. Okay, I'm just going to give you a dimension, and while I'm giving you that dimension, I guess my interpretation of so it's measuring about 8 feet from the side property line. But my interpretation of the zoning, this is open to the sky. This would be, we call it a loading platform, a loading area. Loading docks are usually typically elevated above the ground, where it would be more of a structure. This is really no different than a concrete pad on the ground, like a sidewalk would be, except it's just a square. It's just a place where an overhead door on the end of the building can open up, so that if a truck does want to pull up to that area, they can take stuff off, because that ramp area goes downhill, providing about a 3.5 foot grade change. That's essentially just kind of a concrete pad. All of the other three sides of the pad are the same elevation as the grass and landscape area around it. So it's essentially just a concrete slab at grade. So that's why we've kind of not called it a loading dock.
I can confirm with the building inspector whether or not it's included as a structure. If it is, it would have to meet the 10-foot setback, which, so you would have to finagle 2 feet out of there. You got one. It looks like you got 1 foot on the other side, and you might have to do something for another foot there.
Yeah, I think we could make that work if we had to to comply with the building inspector's interpretation of that.
So in essence, for layman here, what you would have basically is a downhill driveway, loading area, with a retaining wall to hold back the soil.
Yes.
Fair assessment?
Very accurate and very common.
Okay. Jim, will you look into that?
Yeah, absolutely. I can follow up with Stephen tomorrow on that.
Anything else from the public? Robert?
No, I'm all set. Thank you very much.
And sir, thank you for your input. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
And thank you for working with Mr. O'Connell.
Bill, can I ask one more question? If you don't mind?
Yes.
Jim, is the neighbors across the street, the residential units, they're obviously homes, but are they in a business zone? Like if I look at, it says industrial one side and business one.
Yes, I believe Business Zone runs down South Maple on that side of the street.
So it's not actually a residential zone. It's
No, but in terms of the setback for industrial uses, I believe the footnote does talk about use, not zone. Yeah,
Oh.
use, not, yeah.
okay. Got it. Thank you.
Anything else from the public?
That was that was my one comment about use versus zone, because I was aware that it was a business one zone. Although there are duplexes, probably 4 of those built along there, and single family houses, et cetera.
Jim, what's our next step? I think we
Well,
addressed, all the concerns except for one in regards to the neighbors. What's our next step?
So, it's up to the board. There are some minor changes to the plan, such as a hydrant location, potentially talking about a 2-foot additional setback. And that's really all I have there. I've heard some conditions already stated tonight. If the board has exhausted their review, we could certainly, the board could certainly direct me to start drafting a decision for review at the next meeting. In the meanwhile, Stephen could correct the plan accordingly.
And that would be tentative based on the description of the loading dock, location of the hydrant. Anything else?
I have that the restrictive hours of operation would be in the condition there. I've written down, I don't think we ever determined exactly, so I have written down 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. as kind of conservative, because what I heard was 7 to 5 essentially, but again, that people show up a little bit early, some people leave a little late, so I'd hate to, if we did 7 and people starting at 6:30, Tim's going to get a call saying they're starting too early. So I think it would be safer to do something that works for all parties.
I'm fine with that, but Jim, I would like a condition, and Stephen, you just let your owner know this. Hypothetically, we do go 6 to 9 for hours of operation. I wouldn't want to see one of your vehicles outside there at 5 o'clock or 5:30 waiting to get in with their engine running. So you're big cognizant of the deliveries impacting the neighbors.
Absolutely.
I realize most of them will be done 9 to 5, but really, a rare example that something could happen. We don't want them idling and waiting outside with, before the property actually opens.
Yeah, absolutely. That's not something we would expect to see. And, we do have tenant does have control over those deliveries. If an employee is coming to work early to do some paperwork, and they're a morning person and they show up at 6 a.m., that's not going to disrupt anybody, but the deliveries, absolutely, we can control that.
I think we're only concerned about the deliveries.
Great. Sounds good.
I entertain a motion at this point.
Bill, can I just make one more suggestion in terms of conditions?
Yes.
Thank you. So Jim, does Premier have any time constraints in their operation?
I'm not certain. I don't believe they do, but I'm not certain. I don't have that in front of me.
Okay. And so my other condition would be no outside activities. I don't know if we talked about that. I know that Premier had a condition where they couldn't leave the doors open. So when they did work on the inside, so if they can keep their exterior delivery door closed. And maybe if we can take a quick look at the applicable conditions that Premier has in terms of trying to keep it down for the neighbors. I think that would be good.
I can certainly have those for you. Yep.
Thank you.
Brian, would you like to make a motion?
Yeah, so I will move that Jim draft a decision subject to the discussion tonight and the conditions that we discussed and any other applicable conditions that he might come across, so we can discuss that with the next meeting, Jim, or?
Yes, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, next meeting.
Okay.
Anything else? So technically, we're motion on the floor right now. I need a second.
Second?
We're motion on the floor to draft a favorable decision based on the conditions outlined this evening. It has been seconded. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Robert, thank you very much for coming. I encourage you to work with you. I think they'll be good neighbors. Yeah, please feel free to work with Jim and Tim down the road. And Steve, thank you very much.
May I also get just a continuation to the February 25th meeting?
So moved.
Yeah, so we have not closed the public hearing.
Correct.
Continue it to the next meeting.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor of continuation of the public hearing to the next meeting date, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. That date will be Thursday, February 25th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Robert, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The second item on the agenda is to continue public hearing on 161 and 169 Maple Street. Jim, can you bring us up to date on LMP properties?
Yep. Yeah. So at our last meeting, which was some time ago for this applicant, it was, I believe we went through the checklist and the products that have been provided to date. And there were a number of items that we asked for the applicant to revise and provide to us. In your package this evening, you have an updated plan set provided by GZA, narrative and development plan responses. You also have from our deputy fire chief the applicable fire code. And let's see, and that's essentially it, I believe.
Is the applicant here?
Yes, good evening, Chairman and members of the board. This is Kim Crowe for the applicant. I'm an attorney representing the applicant LMP Properties. And I'm here also with Steve D'Ambrosia from GZA, who's worked on the plans, and Will Boyle, who's a representative of the applicant itself.
The floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. All right, so there are a few, just quick introduction. The address, as Jim Kupfer had mentioned, 161 and 169 Maple Street. This is an existing mulch yard. The application tonight, or that's been continued, that we're discussing tonight, was triggered by a stormwater system that the applicant is proposing. And that'll be a treatment and detention basin that takes it over the square footage, which is the reason for filing the application. There is a house currently on 161 that will be removed to accommodate the stormwater system, which will essentially cover that entire property. There are a few things that I want to run through tonight. When we continued at the last meeting, one of the major issues we talked about was the environmental controls. So I want to provide an update on that aspect, address some of the town comments that we've received, run through the waivers, and then Steve will go through the plan itself. So starting off with the environmental controls. I mentioned at the last hearing, we don't believe that the compliance with the environmental
Jim,
controls.
can I just interrupt you for one moment?
Go ahead.
Jim, have you been provided with these ahead of time?
Yes, yeah, they're in part of the development plan response
Okay, just want to make
letter.
sure.
Yep.
Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, thank you. So the environmental controls, we don't believe that the bylaws require compliance with those based on the application that we're submitting. I went through that at the last meeting. That being said, the board had expressed concern and wanted to hear more on each of those aspects. And we did provide that. We believe that we do actually comply with the environmental controls. The main one that was sort of the biggest issue previously and the most applicable for discussion tonight is the noise bylaw. Back in 2017, we had a noise report from Kavanaugh Tachi. I did reach out to them to see if we could get an update to that report, but the sound engineer has retired, so it would be basically a full-blown new report. There hasn't been anything that's changed between 2017 and today. The mulch operation has been on the property for well over 10 years, and it's substantially the same, if not quieter today based on new equipment that's used in the mulch business, both with stacking and with the type of chipper and processing equipment that they use on the site. The noise report does confirm that we comply with the noise requirements insofar as there's the stated decibel limits, and then there's provisions that allow 10 to 20 decibel increases over those provisions. And if you've taken a look at it, our property lines have levels of 57 to 71 decibels, and that's actually less than the truck traffic that drives down Maple Street, which is 72 to 84 decibels. That's what is existing, what has been existing. Our application does include a new fence that is proposed over the retaining wall. And that's going to be designed to be a solid wood fence that acts as a sound fence. At 8 feet, it would reduce sound levels by approximately 10 decibels. That information is in the report. It is within 10 feet. Based on the definition of structure and the bylaws, I don't believe we would need a variance to put an 8-foot fence there. But assuming that we don't need a variance, we would also be agreeable to an 8-foot fence. And we had noted that in the updated materials that we submitted. The next aspect of the controls is lighting. There are no lights on the site that would, there are really no lights on the site, particularly when the house is removed. So there's no aspect of that. The air quality standards, we have operational standards at the property that ensures there's no air quality issues. The employees and the people working on the site are instructed not to be doing certain work that could create particles on days that are dry and breezy, which could potentially have a release of those. And we included a fire prevention plan in the materials that we had submitted. And that fire prevention plan includes, I'll talk about that further on, but it includes turning the mulch piles, which also has the effect of reducing odors. So those two together ensure that there's no air quality issues. There are no vibration or electrical aspects at the property. And of course, the stormwater standard, there currently isn't a stormwater treatment or detention for the properties. There was a thorough process through Conservation Commission that talked about various aspects of the site that are shown on the plans. And through that process, there was an extensive peer review process of the stormwater system. There were actually 9 iterations of the peer review process that took place. And so it was very well documented. And the new system does comply with the stormwater standards as a matter of zoning, in addition to the items that conservation took a look at. And that will both treat the runoff from the mulch yard and then hold it, ensure that there's no drainage or other issues that are caused from water on the site. There were a few town comments, both from DPW and the fire department. The DPW had requested potentially adding a catch basin to control some of the Maple Street water and tie it into the drainage system that's being planned on 161 Maple. Unfortunately, that's not possible with the system that's designed and with the treatment that's built into it based on it being a mulch yard. So the way that the water is treated and then held in the detention basin, number one, it's not big enough to handle the Maple Street, even though it takes up virtually the entire property on 161. But it also just wouldn't work in connection with that. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to help out in that aspect. But DPW did ask for an easement through the property to allow the town access to the land behind ours from Maple Street. And we are okay with granting an easement along the access road on the south end of the property alongside the wetland area, or the buffer to the wetland area. As to the fire comments, we did provide a plan and information in narrative form as to how we comply with the Massachusetts Fire Code at 527 CMR 1, which incorporates the National Fire Protection Act, or NFPA 2015. I'm actually not sure what that last A stands for. So a lot of the fire protection is based on education of the people working on the system and various aspects of making sure that fires don't start in the mulch facility. There have been advances in technology I mentioned before with different aspects of mulch processing. And one of those, the prior operator, when it was Cobb, prior to the current owners buying it in 2014, there were fire issues that took place, and a lot of that was based on trucks would drive the mulch to the top of the piles. And in doing so, they would heavily compact the piles, and when the piles are very compacted, that is what has the potential to start fires. In contrast, we now have the operator has stackers, so they're able to, from the ground, bring the mulch up, and there's no equipment on top of the piles that compresses it. Part of the plan is moving the piles around, and so that lets air out and reduces the potential for fire and reduces odors by keeping a regular basis of turning and moving those piles, all while doing that, ensuring that there's adequate space for a fire truck to get through the piles if there was a fire to start, and that would need to happen. There's training for the employees there. The JD Raymond, who's the operator of the site, does have a water truck available, and that is there to douse heat if there starts to be embers or a fire starts to look like it's going to begin, and they're instructed to call the fire department if it does look like there's going to be a potential for danger. And the same, the water's there to water down any particles, which also helps with air quality. So I can move on to waivers, or I can stop there for questions, whatever the board prefers. And Chairman, you're on mute.
Jim, your comments so far based on what the applicant has said?
Yeah, so we do have a number of issues that we certainly could get into. Kim, I don't know if we want to just quickly just run through those waivers, and then we could have a kind of holistic conversation.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, all right. So the waivers that we had requested were the scale 1 inch to 200 feet. We've used the Conservation Commission plans, and the scale used, I believe, is easier to see than if we were to update it. Another waiver we requested was for details on 300 feet surrounding the properties. I can pull up an aerial. There's an industrial use behind, and then of course the house is being taken into the site. And so there doesn't appear to be any purpose for the context of this plan, which is really all contained on the property and adds a stormwater system to this existing operation. We requested a waiver for the landscape plan. We did add trees to our most recent submission, and to the extent a waiver is required, we're still requesting that, but we do believe that the plans either comply or certainly come quite close. Parking, we requested a waiver. There's no parking on site. The applicant does own property on the other side of Maple Street, and all the parking takes place over there. And similarly, the parking requirement also comes in, I believe, if you have 10 or more spaces, which we don't have. But in any event, there really isn't anything to show. The landscaping, oh, that's what it is. The landscaping under Article 11. That has to do with the 10 parking spaces. So we don't believe that that's applicable, but we did add the landscaping, and also on the plans is the new landscaping that was part of the conservation process, and that will be replacing some of the trees that need to be removed in order to do the retaining wall along the front and the sound fence. We do have, in that wetland buffer area, we're adding 42 new plantings, including 5 red cedar and 21 witch hazel. And it would probably work out best. Steve, do you want to pull up the plan now and talk about the details of it? And then the board has everything in front of them.
Certainly. For the record, my name is Steve D'Ambrosio with GZA. Let's see. Jim, do I need to request permission, or can I just share my screen?
You should be good to go now.
Hopefully you're seeing the plan?
Not yet.
No,
No,
huh?
nothing yet.
All right. How about now?
Yes.
All right, fantastic. One of the things that was requested was for us to show existing trees along Maple Street. There were a few missing from our plan set. These trees added along the frontage, these are existing trees that need to come out as part of the project improvements. The landscaping additions that Kim had mentioned are along this southern property boundary and are shown on this plan here. And my apologies, my computer fan tends to run when I'm doing graphics works, and I've been told it's pretty obnoxious, but there's unfortunately nothing I can do about it. So my apologies for the interference with the sound. But here where the plantings are located, there's a planting list, I believe in the upper portion here, that discusses the plants that are proposed. One of the other things that—
Real quick, Steve, I
Yeah.
just wanted to clarify. So these are the plantings that are required by conservation for replication of the disturbance of the wetlands, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Additionally, we had mentioned the proposed easement. So that easement to be granted to the town will run along the southern boundary within the proposed access road. And it extends out to Maple Street. The other thing that we now show in the plans is we call out a timber sound wall on top of the block retaining wall along Maple Street. And there's a detail on the next page that describes what that wall will look like. So here's your modular gravity block retaining wall. On top of that will be a wooden sound wall. The heights of both of these will vary, but the overall height is proposed to be 8 feet. Really, there's not much more to show on these plans. Those are the main additions that we made. And, you know, I'm happy to go over any other aspects of it if the board would like.
I think we may have some questions after we hear from board members. Steve,
Certainly.
anything else you, Kim?
No, that's it for me for now. Thank you.
What I'd like to do now is open up to the board. Brian?
Yeah, so couple things. So I live roughly about a mile or so away from the facility, maybe a little bit further. And so I drive by quite often. I'm very familiar with the site, the operations of the site, the vehicles entering and leaving, the trucks, and things like that, just from living next to it for 12 years now. So I have a lot of questions and some concerns regarding some of the statements relating to noise, and perhaps that's something that a sound study would help us better understand. And I would suggest that the noise study needs to occur at a time when the facility is operating, that's grinding of the wood, because oftentimes I think some of the function of the site, and I could be wrong, but some of the function of the site is largely just storage and allowing the mulch to compost and become mulch that we buy at stores. So I know for a fact that I would drive by the site and there would be grinding going on. It's quite loud. And I would get to my house, and like I said, probably about a mile away, and I could still hear it. So, and I know that there have been other comments throughout our work with this particular applicant from other neighbors that have articulated the same observation. So I question the results of the 2017 sound study, and I would probably suggest that we have another one done and peer reviewed so we can look into that further. And then with regard to the air quality, again, that's an easy one to know that some of the statements in the proposal is not exactly accurate. All you really need to do is stand at the entrance of Maplegate and take a deep breath to understand the odor situation. If you drive by with your windows closed and your exhaust closed in your car, you can still smell the mulch, and you could probably, within 50 feet before and 50 feet after of the facility of passing in a car with closed windows, you can still smell that. And I can tell you that oftentimes during the day, from my house, again, over a mile away, there is a distinct odor of the mulch. And so I question statements that say that odor is not a problem. I question statements saying that there are functions that don't occur at the site under certain conditions. I can tell you that over the years I've seen operations going in all kinds of different conditions. I can tell you that with regard to the trucks carrying the mulch, that just like passing the mulch yard, if a truck carrying mulch passes you, there's stuff flying out the back. There's the smell just smacks you in the face. So I don't believe the statements that there's no emission or odorous gas. It's just not credible. And just go there right now. Just drive down Maple Street right now, and I think that that would bear itself out. With regard to something that wasn't addressed in your application material is traffic sightlines with regard to that facility, with regard to cars or trucks, specifically leaving the site, in terms of sightlines and in terms of the trucks remaining on the side of the road. If there is none, but if there was a yellow line going down Maple Street, those large trucks cross that yellow line quite frequently. And if you're familiar with the area, it's the site is located right sort of on a bend. It's wooded. So that has always been something that I've been concerned with. Also that there's equipment and people crossing the road from one side of Maple Street to another. So those are some other concerns that I have. And then with regard to the fire, and I don't know if the chief is still on, he can certainly address that, but I can tell you that on the coldest days in the wintertime, those piles steam. And I often wonder to myself, who's watching those piles in the middle of the night? And what kind of monitoring is being done, and what kind of reaction could we possibly have if one of these piles should combust? And we've heard about those piles doing that, and the internal temperature and all of that stuff. So I think there's much work to be done. And what I would ask also, and I've asked this in the past, and I've never ever been provided with the information, is a list of the chemicals that are used to treat the mulch, because it's not simply just grind up a tree and it compost it. I mean, it's changing colors. It's emitting a smell. I think, and I could be wrong, and you can educate me, but I've been led to believe in the past that there is some level of treatment that goes on. And if there's a list of chemicals that are used, I would be interested in finding out what those are.
Anything else, Brian?
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. Thank you, though.
Liz?
I just had a question about the height of the piles, and I apologize if this was answered in a previous meeting, but in your rendering, it looks like they'll be the height of the fence. Is that actually what's happening, or will they end up being higher than the fence?
No, the piles are higher than the fence. They vary in height, really starting at about 10 feet, but they can go up to 60 feet. So they are significantly higher than the fence.
Okay. And then in terms of the lighting, it says, you know, there's no lighting on the property or proposed. So does that mean if someone needed to access the property at night, there would be no lighting, or it's just no lighting that's interfering with abutting properties?
There's no lighting on site. So if there was a vehicle going onto the site, they would have lighting on it, but there is no site lighting.
Okay.
And I'd like to get back to the lighting. Dennis?
Yeah, what fence are they putting up? The one he just showed us in his schematic that's horizontal, or the one that we were sent that's vertical?
I
I'm trying to
believe
understand the question. The fence is it's a vertical fence.
Oh, okay. The one you just showed me though was horizontal, the boarding on it.
Oh, the boarding.
That's more like something you see on 495 or something.
Gotcha.
This is much more decorative. If you can get Maple Street to look this good, I think the DOT will hire you.
So you're saying there's a conflict with what's shown in the rendering and what we had in our detail.
Exactly. This is a much nicer, beautiful fence. The one you showed me is pretty much the basic you see in the interstate sound barrier.
I don't think we have any issue with either one of them. I think that was just a matter of putting the plans
No,
together.
it's-
There was not,
Well,
The look of
potentially
it,
to check
the
for a
issue.
moment, I do have a problem. I think in your outline, and I was going to reserve my comments to last, but since they've been brought up, figures 3 and 4. Number one, they don't represent what is actually there. That's far from a fair representation of what is going on.
correct.
And I think that's a gross misrepresentation to the board of what it looks like.
They are
And
no,
I could use more significant words, but I'm going to stop at gross. And I think Brian may agree that we have not seen piles that low in quite a period of time. But I'm going to reserve my other comments after we've heard from some other board members.
and if I,
Phil?
Yeah, so the drawings to scale and, 300 feet surrounding, I don't think those are burdensome, to the applicant. I mean, those are things we require from everybody. The landscaping plan, I mean, that's pretty basic stuff. So I don't think it's overly burdensome in this situation. The 60 feet, going up 60 feet, I know in the past I've said on suggestions from other board members where we have some sort of flagpole or something that's 60 feet so that can be measured easily by an inspector or somebody like that. So maybe a flagpole might be useful to the situation. The other thing I was seeing was on the drawings, the gates seem to be right on the street, pulling in and out of the street. Where's your truck? Where the truck's going to be when the gate's being open to, pull in? It's, if the gate's closed, I don't see that's actionable as it is right now. I'm kind of curious about the hours of operations with, no lighting whatsoever on the site. I would assume that the hours of operations would have to be daylight, and during the winter months, daylight ends before 5 o'clock. So I'd be interested to hear what your hours of operations on this site would be. I think that's good for starters.
All right, thank you. I concur in regards to the noise study. I would like to have an outside peer review do a noise study for us. I also in agreement with regards to landscaping. I know you have a comment about what I said was.
Did I lose connection?
Yeah, Phil, you're kind of cutting in and out there, but
I do want something done with regards to the landscaping. In regards to hours of operation, based on what we decide, I think temporary lighting may have to be on site. If you ever do go beyond daylight hours, but I would like to see it reduced back to daylight hours. In your presentation, you mentioned that the trucks are no longer going to the top of the piles. That may be true, but I have, in the past 6 or 7 months, seen some of your trucks using a ramp to drive up onto the pile. A big concern I have is fire prevention. And with the National Fire Code and the mass amendments, I think there's some things we should look at. Obviously, piles cannot exceed 60 feet. I think if more than one pile exists, you need a 30-foot access road between the piles. Also think you should have a 30-foot width around the entire facility. You also need low barrier walls to define each pile. I would feel very comfortable with the fire suppression system if it's available. I'll get back to that in a minute. We need to be concerned about the road across, traffic going back and forth across the street. With that in mind, you have 2 gates on Maple Street. I think they need to be set back a little bit so we don't impact the traffic on Maple Street. And I'm going to go back to something that's not been brought up for a couple of years. It's been a concern of mine. We would like a copy of your safety or risk management manual and program. When it was bought by, from COB by J.D. Raymond, their response to a risk management safety program was lacking. And I think Dennis was with me. They judged the effectiveness of their safety program, quote, on a reduction in the number of phone calls to the fire department, end quote. That's no way to run a safety program. I'm sure I'm going to get some feedback on my comment that it was a gross misrepresentation of your figure 3 and figure 4, but it has never looked like that most of the time I've driven by. And with that said, I'd like to open up to the public. And then hear back from the applicant.
I don't believe there's any comments from the public, Bill.
Tim, do you have any concerns?
Hi, good evening. So along with your concerns, maybe a actual picture of the piles reflected on the plan, so we know where the barriers would actually go and how much they could actually fit would be helpful, I think, to show what their operation is gonna look like with the 30-foot road around the property and in between the piles to see how many actual piles there would be. I think mentioned before would be the story pole for a measurement would be helpful for enforcement, so we know how high these piles are actually mounting to when they're processing. Other than that, just adhering to the chapter 31 that was mentioned. There are several items in that chapter that I think we should definitely have reflected on the plan, so we can have an understanding of how those regulations are going to fit onto that parcel and with their operation, I guess. And
yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think to Tim's point too, so you had brought up a number of things for the fire code. I know our deputy chief is here as well, and I know I've had many conversations with him about this. And Kim, your narrative does talk to chapter 31. So we certainly, you know, I know there was some back and forth about which code we were truly adhering to. We took, your lead your outline of this is the chapter we're going to adhere to. So, the deputy and I sat down, and I think the plan needs to reflect that. So as the chairman had mentioned, there's things like low barrier walls around the piles shall be provided to clearly define pile perimeters, prevent creep, and facilitate cleanup of the fire department access road. So I know the applicant has talked many times about shifting around and we can't possibly delineate a pile, but it's clearly outlined in this fire code that it is required. So I think on that plan, you're going to have to define where that is. And within those, again, it's the 30-foot drive aisles for access. So 30 around, 30 through, 30 between. So that, I think, will probably do the job for you of defining where those piles may be. One thing that I know the chairman had brought up about fire suppression, and maybe it's not to that extent of fire suppression, but the code does talk quite a bit about having these piles wet over time so the fines don't dry out. And I know you got a truck on site, so maybe that suffices. I would ask your guys' opinion, I guess, on in that regard. I don't know if the deputy has any other comments.
Good evening. Yeah, I have a couple of things. One, I think that we have a small problem with having the truck is fine as long as they can have a hydrant location or a place that they're getting water from. But if they're going to be going back and forth across the street or out into Maple Street, they will probably have to move a hydrant location onto the site to give them a water source that they can both fill the truck from and have a water source for fire prevention, as well as protection on that property. The story pole is also a good indicator so that we can see that, as well as making sure that the piles, when they're loading the trucks, are safe, and when they leave them for the night, that there's not any chance that the piles are left in a safe manner, so there's not any chance of a collapse or any kind of a problem with that. So that's what I have for right now. Also, there's a sliding gate that would need a Knox box, and some type, if it's manual, it will need a Knox box with a key so that we have 24-hour access to that property.
Deputy Chief, can I ask you a question? If you're there at night, what do you bring for temporary lighting? Anything?
Yeah, our apparatus is all set up for temporary lighting. Lighting on a site like that is not a problem for us. I think it's more of a problem for maybe the police department to make sure that there's not kids going through there or running through or trying to be in the piles. That would be more of my concern for our part of it. If we're there for firefighting, we do bring lighting towers that are all mounted to the vehicles.
Jim, I have a question for you. Early on, it was mentioned about wastewater treatment. What are your concerns about the response from the applicant?
Sorry, I think you're referring to stormwater treatment?
Yes, or wastewater treatment.
So, so I will say that they did do a robust plan for that stormwater. It was peer reviewed by VHB. At the time, I sat through many of those hearings. My only real comment, well, it is a unique system, but it is private system. So, if there's any failure to the pumps or whatever, it may be, it's on the entity to fix those. That wouldn't be something that I think that the town would ever design or construct. But my only issue, and it's a small issue with that, is the maintenance access location. So the gate that sits on Maple Street. I would recommend, if we can, put it in a place on site. Maple Street is a very busy road, as we've all discussed, and it's where this is designed basically as it's Maple Street's their private driveway, and I think having a lawnmower crisscrossing up Maple Street is not ideal. So if we could simply have the maintenance gate on the interior, I think that would make it a much safer location.
Any other comments, Ken?
I'm sorry,
Any
what was
other
that?
comments?
Oh, let's see. No, if I could just real quick, just review what I have here. So I've heard from the board regarding noise peer review, and we'll talk to the peer review about the adequacy of the existing study. It sounds like a landscape plan is still requested. I've heard discussion of traffic sight lines, especially now that a large 8-foot fence is going to be proposed. We still need that illustrated. I didn't hear the board really discuss it, but with that landscape plan, I know Steve had mentioned, the plantings. Typically in a landscape plan, we don't count the replication area for disturbed wetlands as landscaping, but I'll leave it to the board for that. Let's see what else I have here. Detail of that fence that's being proposed. Which one may it be? It would be good to nail that down. And then obviously all the many things through the fire code I think needs to get on the plan. And I'm happy to sit down with Steve and Kim and the deputy and maybe go through that in a little more detail as like a little workshop in between now and then.
Kim, do you have any other comments?
From me?
Yes.
Yes, I'd like to respond to those, if I may. So, all right, I'll start off with just the stormwater gate, since that was the last thing we talked about. We did look at that gate. That gate will be used very rarely, according to the operation and maintenance plan, but one or a couple of times a year, not very often. We looked at the other possible location where we could tie it in to 169 is sort of the top left, but it's a curbing, it's a part of the stormwater design that directs stormwater from the mulch yard into the treatment portion of the system and then into the detention pond. So if the gate would have a negative effect on the purposes of the stormwater. So that's why it's located at Maple Street, and we think that makes the most sense from a stormwater perspective. And we really don't see another spot that we could put it. And we can talk more about that between now and the next meeting if there's any additional questions.
Kim, if I may, I'll just jump in here. I mean, that right now it's a residential property. There's a driveway associated with the house. There's vehicles, going in and out of that driveway. It's going to be significantly more than you'll see traffic coming through the fence and the access drive for that detention basin.
Yeah, I think the point is, with a residential driveway, people anticipate vehicles turning in and out.
Mm-hmm.
With a chain link fence that's locked, I don't think they're going to anticipate the pickup truck stopping on Maple Street to unlock the gate to take a right into the stormwater system is just my concern there.
All right, so I'll move on. I'll start with the odors. And I apologize, I didn't mean to suggest the site has no odors. It is a mulch yard, and a mulch yard does have odors. My comments were more to address so that we've taken precautions with respect to a mulch yard to keep the odors as minimal as possible and to prevent them from being spread out. There is another mulch facility that's not that far away. I don't know which odors go with which, but certainly mulch yards do have odors. We have been taking time, the operation of the site attempts to create a less offensive situation with the odors and to keep those odors down as much as possible. I'll move on to noise. The noise report that was done was during the chipping, loading, and trucking aspects of the site. The noise report mentions that those things were occurring when they did it. If the board would like to get a peer review, we're not objecting to that. That sounds reasonable based on everything that your concerns are. But I did want to note that was included in there. And the renderings that are on there, that figure 3 and 4, they are renderings of the sound wall. They were included as part of the noise report. To be honest, I didn't even look at the mulch pile aspect of it, and I apologize if that was taken to be a view of what the site will look like. Certainly there's no fence there now, but that looks like that. It's not a current situation, and the mulch piles are higher than that. So I apologize if the board took that as being something other than the rendering of the wall, which it was included in the noise report for those purposes. I believe that was it on the noise. So 2 things I will work on obtaining are the list of materials used to treat the mulch. There is a treatment process that goes into that, and safety and risk management program. I'll talk to the applicant about those 2 things. The traffic aspects, we did submit to the board a turning radius for the fire trucks. And so that the fire trucks can get in and out, and that should satisfy other trucks that would be going in and out, as the fire trucks are clearly bigger, but that is, excuse me, included as part of the updated information that we submitted recently. Just making sure before I move to fire that there wasn't anything else that I'm missing on those parts of it. The height control pole, we can talk about that also. That'll be another thing. As far as the fire goes, our reading of the fire code with the markers for where the piles are, our thought on that was having more or less construction type barriers that are not fixed in the ground and are movable, where you can clearly see where the pile is, but that would allow additional fire prevention aspects of being able to move the piles around while still maintaining the 30-foot access way between the piles. That's included in the fire prevention plan that we submitted, and of course as part of the code. We can talk between the next meeting, the thoughts on that, but that seems to be our view of the best way to both provide the fire department with a clear indication of where the openings are between the pile, and allow the applicant to do what it needs to do with moving the piles to prevent a fire from occurring. The 30-foot separation is in there. The water treatment, there is a fire hydrant nearby. When we were talking, trying to find it on the plan, I am not 100% sure exactly where that is. And then we do also have water service from the residential property that will be retained after the house is taken off. So we do have other sources of water besides the truck.
Kim, the hydrant is right near the entrance to the site.
Okay.
The hydrant right on Maple Street to the north of the entrance.
So there's one close by and available. And I think that is it for responding to the comments, but I'm happy to provide additional information if I either missed something or if there's additional information on those points and the things that we will work on prior to the next time.
Can you just pick up on something you mentioned?
Mm-hmm.
I'm confused on something. You have a house that's going to be torn down at some point? Is that correct?
Correct. Where the stormwater system is going in, there's an existing residential house that's owned by the applicant.
Okay. At one point, within the time frame you had purchased it from Cobb, they mentioned the fact that water to the area was provided by literally, I think Dennis, you were with me that evening, a hose from a resident for that, to provide access for water. Is that still the case?
I'm not 100% sure. I know that they have owned that property for quite some time. They owned the residential house. They bought the residential house at the same time they purchased the mulch yard. So it might have been that they've used that water service from previously.
Chip, would you like to see more enhanced source of water than just say, a hose from?
Yeah, I would leave it to the deputy, whatever is, would work best for, for fire to make sure that they're comfortable with it, that, it's they're wetting and not drying it out. But, I think I can certainly, between now and the next meeting, we can hash that out with the applicant.
So Jim, does the public have anything they want to say?
I don't believe there's any comments from the public, no.
Jim,
Can
what's the
I-
next step? Brian?
I'm sorry, just one issue, I think, Kim, if you don't mind looking at, is the trucks and other vehicles taking a right out of the site when they cross over. They have to cross over. So I'm thinking that the entrance needs to be adjusted. So in your sight line analysis, how the trucks can leave the site taking a right without crossing over into the other lane. Thank you.
So Jim, at this point, we'll need a motion for a peer review of the noise study, is that correct?
No, I've received proper guidance and the applicant has agreed to move forward with it. So I'll work with getting a peer review study or scope, excuse me, over to the applicant. And we can hopefully have something by the next meeting.
Tim, we've asked a lot of you, and we appreciate the work you've done to date. What's a good time frame for you to be able to get back to us with these? Would you like to push us out to the March or April meeting, or I know you have a season coming up.
Right. I would say March would probably be good. Just look.
March 25th? March 25th, perhaps?
Would work for me. Steve, would that work for you?
Yeah, I don't think it'll be a problem. I'm curious if that'll be enough time for the board to get a peer reviewer.
Yeah, that might be the only lingering thing is the noise study, but we can, we'll try and push. There's only like 2 games in town, my understanding, for noise. So.
Okay.
And if for some reason the peer review wasn't done in time, we would agree to continue it to another date that works, so we could just come back and have a comprehensive discussion also.
So Jim, we need a motion to continue this to April. Is April 1st a good date right now?
March 25th.
Okay, I just wanted to add some, okay.
Oh, you mean the extension of the deadline? We'll work with Kim to extend that deadline.
So I'll move to continue the hearing until March 25th.
Public hearing. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor of extending the public hearing to March 25th, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Kim and Steve, thank you very much.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Have a nice evening.
You too.
Jim, we have some more things that have come up recently before we get to general business. We have an agreement on the developer with regards to the signalization.
Yeah, so actually you may recall from the last meeting we had this agreement, and this is an amended agreement. And really what it boils down to is when we finalized that agreement, we provided it to the developer and the investor. The investor had a question, and I believe the developer had a different translation than what we had. And essentially what it boiled down to was the developer read the agreement to say that at the end of this year, if they didn't put up the light, we would. And I can understand why they might think that, because we're holding their money, and the security says we will put up this, this money is funds to put up the signal if the town has to. And what I stress to them is that key of what if we have to. The town's not in the business of constructing if we don't have to, because it costs us significantly more than a private entity would. I explained to them that, we're holding the funds, we wouldn't release those funds, and we wouldn't construct the signals, so they would be still adhering to the decision, which requires a detail there. So not only are they out 300 grand, but they're also paying for a detail in perpetuity, because now they don't have funds to build the signal. So they didn't like that option, so they decided to, or we agreed to, amend the agreement so that it spells it out a little more clearly. And basically basically what our town council has added in there is make it clear that at no point do they get out of our decision, which says that a detail has to be there until the signal goes up. And that basically we're going to hold the funds, and they're going to be responsible for putting it up, and then they can draw down, just like we do for every other infrastructure project. We hold a security. The developer requests, hey, I've put in all the sidewalk. Can you release 100,000? I bring it to you all. We all agree that, okay, you can have your 100,000 back. So this just really clears it up for them, and not only for the investor, but it also clears it up for DOT, because what Mass DOT was asking is who's going to maintain this signal, and not the signal at the end of the day, but this temporary signal, the blinking signal. And we definitively said we're not taking care of it. So this clears it up so that at DOT's maintenance plan, until it becomes a full signal, Lincoln Properties and their investors are going to be maintaining the blinking signal until a full signal goes in place.
So once a full signal's in place, the investor and the developer are no longer responsible.
Right. So basically, what happens at that point is much like whenever we accept a street for a subdivision, we would probably actually time it to accept the street, so that all the infrastructure as well would then be ours typically, but with 140, that signal then becomes DOT. We'll take responsibility for things like drainage that's along the roadway and sidewalk plowing now and road plowing.
You need a motion to approve that?
Yeah, so it's honestly, it's not required, but I explained to the investor that I would get a motion of support from the planning board if they agreed with it, so that they're more comfortable with it.
I'm in favor. Would anyone like to make a motion?
It would be the motion to accept the agreement as amended.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any comments? I apologize. I asked for comments earlier. All in favor of approving the support for the agreement? By saying aye.
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 Opposed? That motion passes. Jim, do you have any A&Rs?
No A&Rs tonight.
Any voucher reports?
No vouchers. We chose not to spend any money.
Okay, that's good. The only thing we have left is the January 14th minutes. Have we all had a chance to review those minutes?
Yeah, Bill, I just have two quick comments. With regard to Red Mill on the Charles and the waivers, unless I missed it, I just want to put in the minutes somewhere that all of those waivers were conditioned on, that we're not necessarily looking for some mechanical application of a bylaw, but we're looking for character and in that kind of statement. So if we can add a statement like that, Jim.
Yep. Yeah, I'll work with Amy to add something in there. Yep.
Yeah, if we could do that. And then my second comment was on page, and I could be misreading it. So on page 5, bottom of page 5, says continuation hearing South Maple Street. And then on page 7, it says continued public hearing 0 South Maple Street. Is that two different applications or two different permits?
Don't believe so.
Nope, that's a good one. I can take that out. Thank you, Brian.
Yep. Those are my only two comments.
Do I have a motion to accept the minutes with those two corrections?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor of approving the minutes from the last meeting with the two amendments that we discussed tonight, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. I guess the next motion is to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Brian, do you have anything you want to say?
Good night, Bellingham.
Thanks, Deputy. Thanks, Tim.
Deputy, thank you very much. Tim, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, have a nice evening. Ladies, have a nice evening.